Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. It is 4 o'clock, and this is a special meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm Commissioner for District 1 and President of the Board, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak, and if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. Can we do a roll call of commissioners? I've identified myself, Jeff Randall, Commissioner for District 1.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, we are all present and accounted for. We have one item on the agenda. It's the FCS rate study. Do we have any other items, or can we have a motion to accept the agenda?
Motion
So
to
moved.
second.
Okay, so Ken made the motion, Dan seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. We have an approved agenda. Okay, who's leading us off?
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can I ask you real quick? Maybe staff or GM can give us a little bit of a background on where we ended up with Beckett Point before we get too far into all this and questions about the different systems come up. I know we were working with them kind of on the side. Does anybody have an update as to where we were with Beckett Point?
Dan, would you mind if we mix that in with the presentation? Because that was one of the items listed was we haven't been following the rate adjustments. Would you be willing to just let staff weave that info in as part of their presentation?
Yeah, I'm good. I just thought that was something that we might need to know up front rather than along the way. I wasn't sure. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Thank you. No, I think it's relevant. I think we need a little bit more background to remind us all of how we got here. Okay, who's going to lead us off?
I'm going to start us off. So please have our FCS partners here with us. The water study was led by Mike Bailey, so I'm going to turn it over to him in just a moment. Just wanted to note that the consultant that we've hired, FCS, provides type analysis for our neighbors. So they have PUD, Mason, and Klickitat, Snohomish, Cowlitz, Chelan, a number of PUD customers that they do similar analysis for. So we're thankful to have strong references in the region for the quality of their work. And I believe we certainly have Sergey with us. I don't know if Paul's going to be joining as well, perhaps. But they both collaborated with us in creating this rate study. So I'll turn it over to Mike to introduce Sergey, and then we'll get into the study results.
So yes, commissioners, thank you. We do have Sergey with FCS here to do the presentation. We're at the end of the original rate study that we did about 3 or 4 years ago now. So this is updating the rates. We've done the electric ones. Now we're moving on to water and sewer. So this is just the first touch of the new water rates presented by FCS. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Sergey for his presentation.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me this afternoon to dive into our first touch of the water and sewer rate study update for this year's study. Can everybody see the screen okay and hear me all right? Awesome. All right, I'll dive right in. So before we...
Just a little bit muted. I don't know if there's an opportunity to adjust your mic, but we can hear you, but kind of barely.
Let's see. I will double check. It says I'm using my speaker, so I'll try to talk a little bit louder. Hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, when you increase your voice, that's on it. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. And I do apologize. I'm getting over a little bit of cold, so that probably is not helping the things either. So before I dive into the discussion today, we'll provide you with a quick outline. We're going to start out with a high-level reminder of the rate study process. As we've gone through the electric study, you should be familiar with this, and you're probably a better experts at this than I am at this point in time. Then we'll get into the background, do a quick refresher of the prior touch point we had for these utilities, so kind of an overview of the last study and what came out of that study. And then we'll switch gears and talk about this update. We'll start out with the key assumptions that went into the analysis, and then progress to results, starting with the sewer utility, and then finishing things off with the water utility. Now, because these systems are interconnected currently, depending on what we decide with the sewer utility, it may have an impact on the water utility. So whatever decisions come out of sewer may influence the water utility. So there is that relationship because they're currently in one division. And we'll be discussing alternative strategies to make sure that each system can meet their obligations. As always, feel free to let me know if you have questions as we go along. Now, from a big picture perspective, a comprehensive race study, such as the one we have been working on for the PUD, includes three analytical steps that need to be performed sequentially. Step number one looks at the overall needs of each utility. The main item here is to kind of a 30,000-foot outlook of our obligations. And the big question is, can we meet those obligations today as well as tomorrow? And ideally, our goal is to make sure that each system can do so independently on a standalone basis without relying on external funding sources or subsidizing one another. That's kind of the gold standard that we're trying to achieve when we're looking at revenue requirements. Once we have established the overall revenue needs, it's common for us to move on to step number two, what we call cost of service, which simply looks at interclass cost allocation, trying to answer the question if there are differences to provide service to different customer classes. So is residential paying their allocated share of costs? Are they underpaying, overpaying, as well as commercial and so on? And lastly, rate design focuses on developing the actual rates that our customers pay through fixed and variable charges. Now, a quick reminder, the last comprehensive study completed for the PD was around 2021. For that first step revenue requirement analysis, we did identify that revenues at those levels were not sufficient to meet ongoing obligations, to meet operating cost requirements, to meet capital, as well as policy obligations. So we were a little bit of, we forecasted a deficiency. And through a series of meetings, we proposed scenarios and then finally settled on a 5-year rate strategy that would get our water utility and sewer utility towards paying their cost to serve their customers from that big first step revenue requirement perspective. Now, one unique item that we addressed during that time is we wanted to start evaluating each of the utilities independently. So we wanted to forecast the water utility on its own, as well as the sewer utility of it on its own, trying to see what it actually costs us to provide service for each utility. And are the utilities carrying their own weight, so to speak? And if not, what can we do to address it and how long it will take to address it? So that was a big item of discussion during the revenue requirement step of the analysis. When we performed the cost of service analysis, specifically focusing for the water utility, we confirmed that actually the rates we have set in place for the major classes of service were actually pretty good and performing well. And the results for the major classes of service was that each class was within their range of reasonableness, what we like to refer to in cost of service rate setting. And we did not need to do any additional modifications on top of the findings from the revenue requirement. So the analysis indicated that our classes for the water systems were paying their equitable share of costs. For the sewer utility, we originally started the process by trying to move forward with a one system approach where during the last study, there was 2 rates in place, a standard rate and a CaliPoint rate. And we were discussing maybe going to a kind of a system-wide rate like many utilities do around this region, because again, depending on the timing, it might cost more for one system this year, then we need to invest capital in another system another year. Similarly, you have water customers connected throughout your points to the system. It's just impractical to have an independent customer-specific rate. So we were discussing potentially moving to a one system-wide rate. Instead, what ended up happening is we went a little bit of a different direction, and we, based on the discussion and input throughout the process, we actually expanded the rate schedule and we evaluated the rates in 3 separate systems. So we separated the rates into a standard rate, CaliPoint rate, and a Beckett point rate as well. And again, we had numerous meetings discussing alternatives, allocations, and so on. Now on the rate design front, we did a couple of modifications to the water utility. First of all, the first modification was introducing a meter-based rate for the residential customers. So at that point in time, everybody paid the same rate, no matter what meter size they had. If they had a 5/8 inch or a 2-inch meter, they paid the same rate. So we introduced a differentiation for larger meters for residential customers. There's also a slight differential between rates paid by CalaPoint volume charges residential customers and other type of volume charges for commercial customers. So we developed a multi-year phase-in, transitioning all customers within residential to the same volumetric rate, all customers within commercial to the same volumetric rate. So again, moving to that one system class-specific rate instead of system-specific rate. And then lastly, for the water utility, we introduced a capital surcharge, which just helped us accrue some funds to start saving money for capital investment, as well as to help us pay for debt service that we incur on an annual basis. On the sewer utility front, once we have established our analysis, we did find that the sewer utility on its own was not quite paying their share of costs, and the water utility was helping meet its obligations since they're in one division. So based on those findings, we actually looked at numerous alternatives that looked at getting the sewer utility towards cost causation, towards carrying their own obligations. And we looked at a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, and a 10-year transition strategy, getting them there. And I believe a 5-year strategy was selected to start moving the system towards cost causation, kind of self-sufficiency. Now, one item to note is that the 5-year strategy included a area-specific rate, which varied by the standard rate, the CalaPoint rate, and the packet point rate. And since that implementation, after the 2022 rates, the Beckett point rates were frozen in place and have not continued at their phased-in proposal strategy. So the Beckett point rates did not continue at the level that was forecasted for the 5-year plan. I see a hand. Commissioner Randall?
Yes, I had to get unmuted there. Could you, Sergey, do you have those numbers for what was being proposed for the phase-in rates for Beckett Point? Are those available to you right now?
Yeah, I do have them available. So the 5-year plan, the 22 rate was $64.62, and that's what I believe it is at currently.
Mm-hmm.
The forecasted 25 rate was $115.36. So almost double of that rate for the Beckett Point system based on the 5-year phase-in. And
Okay.
so far it has stayed at 64.
And then you mentioned that we had broken the 3 systems out, Standard and Kala, separate from Beckett. Do you have the numbers for the other 2, what they were? So you said Beckett was going to be 115 at 2025. What were the other 2 going to be at 2025?
The standard rate, and I believe it is at this point right now, it's 82.78, and the CalaPoint rate is 47.98.
Okay, so we are at the projected rates for those. Okay.
For those 2 systems.
And then I guess lastly, if there's whoever wanted to address Dan's question, now it seems like it would be a good time just to say how we kind of paused, I guess, on the rates for Beckett Point.
So I can add a little bit of information. I was meeting with representatives from Beckett Point, and they had paid for an independent consultant, and they were going to meet with us, I had thought, to talk about the findings of the consultant and what their rates are and what their options are. And over the last, I want to say, 8 or 10 months, they've been silent. I've heard nothing, no emails, crickets from Beckett Point.
So at some point, though, we, the board, took action and paused the rate increases. I guess that's a question for whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, because of the questions that were raised by the Fishermen's Club at Beckett Point, the board did choose not to implement those rates. And to Ken's point, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I do remember, I think it was Kevin Campfield with Beckett
Yes.
Point did do a presentation. I thought at one point in time, I don't remember when it was, that kind of went over their independent report. I think it's been a year or 2 ago.
Okay. And then I have one more question, and then Dan or Ken, if you have any more to add, please do. So Sergey, I don't know if now is the time to talk about it, or if you're going to talk about it ahead in your presentation about we had them broken out into three system types with three different rates, three different costs of services, and now it looks like you're going with a common rate for the three. Is now an okay time to talk about your thoughts on that?
So we can do it now, or we can do it a little bit more towards the discussion point. But that is correct. Kind of previewing the discussion, our proposal this time around, and that's why this is just the first touch point. We want to get your thoughts on it, and then come back incorporating your input. Is that again? We thought it still made sense to go back to a one system approach, just because of the same arguments I discussed earlier. But again, last time we had the discussion, the direction was no, let's take a look at them separately. So that's why we're bringing that question back for you to
Okay,
consider
I'll
again.
let you address that more when we get there. Did the other commissioners want to talk about this anymore, or are we okay to proceed?
I think the
Let's
general manager.
proceed.
I think the general manager has a question or some.
I just want to clarify that the numbers for the audience and for those who are reviewing this, Commissioner Randall's question and Sergey's response is on slide 16, where it shows the existing rates for the three different existing rates and what the proposed rates would be. And then to the question about when the study was performed and given to us, that was in a memo dated on February 27, 2024. That's the consultant's feedback on the Beckett Point system.
So
Thanks, Joe.
So I guess I got a quick question or statement, I guess. Obviously, we need to reach out to Beckett Point before we go too much further, I would think. A little bit of background, if we could. We have 500 septic slash sewer customers. I mean, how big is the wastewater group that we're talking about here if we were to go stand alone with them?
It's only like it's less than 400 customers.
Close to 400. Yeah.
Okay. And I think Beckett's like 160. And so who exactly is the standard group? Obviously, we know what Kayla Point is. We know what Beckett is. What is the other standard rate class?
It's all the other BOC systems that we have. They're spread throughout. They're not.
And those are all conjoined septic, I'm assuming, or is there some other kind of systems in there? I'm just trying to figure out, who should be responsible for the wastewater, if there's balance and equity and parity amongst those 400, let alone trying to subsidize it through 5,000 water customers. So I'm just kind of curious, of who's got the most expense in this wastewater system if we're going to go to a one rate type of a thing, which is kind of where we're headed. Is there parity to do that? Is that fair? Is that equitable? Or does it make sense to maintain a 1, 2, or 3 tiered system on the septic side or wastewater side and make them cover their own costs? I'm fully on board. I was right up front with wastewater carrying its own weight. I don't think it should be being subsidized.
So, Sergey, I think that question might be for you. So Commissioner Tupper's question is essentially, if we go to a standardized rate, is there significantly cross-subsidization within the sewer rate, I think?
So again, it's a policy decision regarding if you want to do an area-specific rate. There are still differences, which we'll have to fine-tune a little bit if we want to have the exact answer. But there are still differences based on our updated analysis if you really track the system like we did last time around from a cost perspective. But again, depending on which year you invest in which system, there could be more or less costs in one system, and then the question also has to be double checked is the precision, how accurately time tracking occurs by system and so on. So if we really want to be there and continue to be system specific, we really want to enhance our time tracking, timesheet entries whenever staff spends labor time directly or indirectly for these positions. So we can fine tune that question for the follow-up meeting if you want us to look at the recalibrated system specific rates. For today's discussion, we were looking at the combined alternative.
I think that would be a good idea, Sergey.
Okay.
If we don't have the data more specifically, then we don't know how much disparity there is between the actual costs of the three standalone systems.
And we will hear about it.
And I guess I did have one more question related to this. Does the PUD own all these systems, or is ownership different on the different systems?
It's a little bit different on each one, Jeff, but um, there's a few that we are just operating and maintaining, and then there's others that we do own.
And is Beckett Point one of the ones we just operate and maintain?
There was a LUD that was created for that one.
So the homeowners then own the system basically.
Yeah, there's that question as to, yeah.
But
Whereas, and I do have a kind of a breakdown from, I think it was actually done in 21 when we had only 376. There was a question about how many were on each system. Beckett Point has 97. Calla Point had 119, and there was 160 in the standard.
and those the standard is broken out by how many other systems roughly?
I know.
Do you understand my question? So we've got
Yeah.
Beckett Point, we've got Calla Point, and then standard I assume includes a few other systems. Is that
Yeah. We think it's about 23, Jeff, but
okay?
right off the top of our head, there's a bunch of different ones.
Okay, and then sorry, Sergey, one more time. So the first year, the last rate study, the 2021, it had. Could you list the three: the standard, the Beckett, and the Calla Point rates for the first year recommendation after the rate study?
So yeah, after the first year of the phase in, when they started to do 22 rates, basically where Beckett Point was frozen at. It was $51 for standard, $64 for Beckett, I'm rounding here, and $31 for Cala. And the forecasted 5-year plan raised the standard from 50 to 83, which is what they're at now. Beckett was supposed to go from 65 to 115, and they stayed at 65. And Cala was supposed to go from 30 and go to 48, and I believe they went to 48.
Okay, so the first year, sorry, I'm not writing, I'm having to type this down. The first year, the standard one was at 51, Beckett Point was at 65, and Calla Point was at what again?
31.
31. Okay. So under that logic, when you were looking at all the information we had, regardless of how complete it was, the Beckett Point system had the highest cost of service. Is that an accurate conclusion?
That's correct.
Okay,
At that time, it showed that it was the more expensive system.
got it. Okay, I don't have any more questions at this point, so unless anybody else does, you may continue.
Okay. So our today's goal is to update the revenue requirement and rate design because the water cost of service was pretty close or really close last time around. We're focusing primarily on the overall need for both utilities. And then again, trying to look at are the systems paying their equitable share of cost? If not, what do we do about it? So similar question that we tried to answer last time. So with that, I'll dive right in. We'll focus on the revenue requirement. Just a quick background. Again, a little bit more context what it is. At the very basic level, it's simply a comparison of your revenues at current levels to your ongoing obligations, making sure that we can meet our costs independently. Just as I mentioned before, because not every customer is a water customer is a sewer customer, not every sewer customer is a water customer, and so on. So we want to be as cost positive as possible. When we're developing the analysis, we're really trying to make sure we meet all costs, direct costs such as operating capital, debt service, but also your indirect costs related to policies. So it costs us to have a certain amount of reserves on hand to make sure our utilities are sustainable, not just today, but also into the future. So we want to make sure we're capturing and being able to support all of the types of obligations. Now, when we're developing the revenue requirement, we try to break things down into 5 key elements. The first one is developing appropriate policies, making sure that the policies we have on hand are the ones we should have and they're still accomplishing their purpose. After that, we want to put a number value to them over our forecast period. What does that mean to our rates? And then embed them with the rest of the elements, including revenues at current levels. We never want to assume there's going to be a built-in increase, as well as expenses where we forecast our costs separately for operating expenses, capital, as well as debt service. And all these elements come together to make up the revenue requirement. Now, in terms
So,
of,
Sergey?
yeah,
Okay, Commissioner Tupper,
Yeah.
you mentioned something there that was one of the questions I had a little further on, but I'll ask it now. And do we know exactly how many of the wastewater customers are not PUD water customers? I think all these things matter at the end of the day when trying to determine the rate impact of whatever steps we take, how it's going to affect each system or each customer differently, even though it's a small group. Do we know how many people are not PUD water customers that we operate a system, water system?
I do not know that answer, but we can definitely look into that
Yeah.
after the
I think
call.
that would help us to make decisions maybe moving forward on how aggressive we want to be. You know, if they're all water customers, they're already looking at water and power increases. But if they aren't necessarily water customers, then it may not be as big of an impact if we were more aggressive. So,
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely follow up and
To answer
take
that
a look
question,
at
we
that.
think it's around 24 customers that are sewer customers, but not water
customers, not systems, right?
Yeah, because
24 households, we'll say, or business or whatever. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Sorry, Sergey.
Oh, no worries. Now, in terms of some of the key assumptions that went into this update, we are looking at the next 5-year period, including the budget. So a total of 6-year projections. The 25 years is almost done, but we had to utilize it as the baseline to help us forecast all the elements of the study. So it's a 6-year in total outlook through 2030. We are using a combination of projected actuals, so year-to-date figures plus projections for the remaining of the year for 25, and the combination of the 26 budget as the baseline for our forecast for expenses. And we did review the expenses in quite a bit of detail with your staff to make sure we're not carrying any one-time expenses into the future, but also we're not forgetting any costs that might be included or may need to be included outside of the first budget year period. Now, there's a couple.
Sergey, excuse
Yep.
me. This shows that the tax/timber revenue is allocated to broadband only, and that's not accurate because we allocate, I believe it's 20% to water.
So, well, with budgetary purposes, I believe that's correct. But from our discussions on the electric system, based on the findings and the need for the broadband system, we modeled the outlook that all the tax and timber revenue will be utilized for broadband purposes. So we're staying consistent with our discussions when we reviewed electric.
So you're basically, it's a look forward kind of idea of if we stopped, if the water wasn't getting any tax support, is what you're saying.
Exactly right. So everyone is right, actually. So Ken is right that the current 23 budget, I believe, had an allocation of 20% towards water, but we did ask FCS to model with no property tax revenues supporting water and sewer.
A little bit further clarification here then on that. Actually, it's the property tax is not the timber tax. The timber tax money is separate money, is it not?
Yes.
So some clarification there. Is any timber money going, that's actually PILT money. That's the money that the county gets, I think, in payment in lieu of tax that comes to us, or is in the form of timber tax or whatever?
So we do have property taxes, but then we do get money off of the DNR's timber sales that do come in, and we do split all that. We consider it all one.
Oh, you do?
It all comes from the county, so we split all that 80-20. We do have to be, part of the reason we moved forward with this is we do have to be careful on a lot of on the property tax money coming in, the use of it for water because of double taxation with the city of Port Townsend.
Yeah, because again, the property tax revenue is $600,000, but the timber revenue, I'm not mistaken, is considerably more, isn't it? Or is it less?
It's not.
Is it less? I might be getting the county's numbers confused with our numbers.
It is a lot less. We don't really make that much timber money. So the 600,000, it all actually is kind of included. The county for us does include it all in kind of the same pot of money.
Okay.
And Mike, just for big number perspective, are we talking like 5, 10, 20, 50? What's the timber revenue approximately?
I
It's
140-ish, I believe, is what
well
was.
that's the tax and timber. That's everything put together. The actual like
Okay.
timber revenue that we money that we get is I want to say it's only maybe 15,000. It's
Yeah, I thought it was pretty small. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great question. So, as we saw here, a couple items to point out regarding the tax and timber for forecasting purposes. We are not including it in the water utility, but again, that is something that you can direct us to reevaluate if you'd like. We are including a new meter reader position in the water utility starting in 26, around $89,000 or so. And then lastly, the maintenance of the sewer plant costs is based on actual historical actual 3-year average plus inflation. So we wanted to be a little bit more granular on the maintenance of the sewer plant and look at what we have actually been spending there and just trying to account for what we spent plus inflationary type costs. When forecasting our revenues, we are using billing statistics for both utilities. We are forecasting growth at about 0.5% for water and keeping the sewer systems flat, no growth for the sewer systems whatsoever. Lastly, for capital funding purposes, and again, because we are forecasting into the future, we are having to assume some level of forecasting, and we can also discuss looking at no debt financing. That could be a scenario as well. But we are assuming utilization of financing. I believe the PD has already secured a low interest loan for 2026, which has a term of 20 years and a very favorable interest rate of about 0.86% for the water system. And we're also anticipating a need for additional borrowing in the future in 2027. Now, because we haven't secured anything, our approach is typically to be conservative. Right now, the low interest money is more scarce than in the past. So we are anticipating the utilization of revenue bonds. Now, in reality, as you get closer to those years and as the need arises, your staff will continue monitoring it. And then if there will be availability for low interest loans, they'll definitely take a look at that. But for planning purposes, we are assuming we'll be using revenue bond financing with a 20-year term and an interest rate of 4.5% with 1% issuance cost. Interest rates have gone up higher than that a little bit, depending on the utility and the terms. So we're again, because it is in a couple of years, we're going back a little bit more to historical averages, but it could be higher, it could be lower. So we're planning for 4.5% for now. Lastly, on the financial policy side, we brought back the policies that were utilized in the prior study. The two of them on the list are associated with reserves, starting with the working capital reserve. So the working capital really is intended to be and act as a liquidity cushion for that cyclical nature of revenues coming in at different rates as expenses going out. We have targeted about 90 days of cash on hand to target operating and maintenance expenses, which translates to approximately 630 to $820,000 for the water utility over that forecast period. And again, the reason why it's going up is because we're forecasting expenses to go up, so our cash reserves have to scale with our expenses. On the sewer front, we're forecasting a need for about $120,000 in reserves, increasing to about $160,000. We do also have access to a $5 million line of credit, which we can use to meet the targets, but ideally, we want to be able to achieve that through having cash available on hand for the water and sewer utilities. The second reserve target is related to capital. It's the intent here is to have some funds available for something unanticipated, minor emergency repairs or project cost overruns. This is not intended to act as a catastrophic event type of a repair. It's supposed to act in a form of buying us time to secure financing to repair something very major. Now, the PUD's policy has been to target or ideally have on hand 50% of a 5-year average annual capital spent, which translates to about anywhere from $2 million to $1.5 million for the water utility. And again, it's a rolling average, so as some of the capital plan rolls off, that's why you see the figures change a little bit on the annual basis. For the sewer utility, we're targeting about $20,000 to $30,000 depending on the year. The last policy is related to debt service coverage, and this is related to specific type of loans. This requirement usually comes with revenue bonds. And again, because we're anticipating the utilization of bonds in the future, we just want to safeguard ourselves and prepare ourselves to be able to meet this coverage requirement for the water division if we are going to borrow revenue bonds. And all it is a requirement that your net operating income, so eligible revenues, net of expenses, need to generate enough money to not only cover the debt obligation, but also generate a cushion, a cash flow in excess of that annual payment. And this simply gives the creditors assurances that you can meet your obligation and you're a credit-worthy investment. Now, typically, a bare minimum requirement before default for these bonds is 1.25, but usually if you want to be rated well and receive a favorable interest rate, you want to target something a little bit higher. So we're trying to achieve a 1.5 target ratio or higher for any bonds that we may forecast in our analysis. So with that general information out of the way, let's dive into some utility-specific information, starting with a sewer analysis. So on the sewer side, starting with that revenue element, as I mentioned before, we are utilizing historical data for a number of units to forecast the revenues by system and in total. We are keeping that flat, not growing it at all into the future. In terms of other revenue sources, we don't really have any other revenue sources except some reserves associated with LUDs that are tied up and are there to help us pay off some debt obligations that we have on hand. There's some last payments that we have to make in 2025. So you'll notice graphically that the chart shows a little bit of an orange color associated with the use of those reserves to pay for that debt service. After the debt goes away, we don't no longer have access to that revenue. So our only source of revenue for this utility at this point is the rates. We are projecting approximately $360,000 with those revenues to $310,000 without those LED revenues per year in rate revenue under existing rate levels. So this is before any kind of rate strategy or any rate modifications included. On the expense front, we are using the 25 actual plus forecast and budget as our baseline. We're forecasting our expenses anywhere from 3% to 6.75%, but our average rate of inflation is around 3.5%. So again, depending on the type of expense, but in general, we're growing at about 3.5% per year. Now, one item to note is that we are not including costs related to Port Headlock sewer system. So again, that's a sewer system. It has specific revenues associated with it. We're not including anything associated with that system in our cost forecast. Oh, there's a question.
Yeah, I don't know if you're done with that slide. I had some questions about that slide. So, I wonder if you could just quickly break out the four categories, the A and G and other, the customer, the power, and the distribution, what those cover. And it looked like A and G and other is got a pretty good jump from 25 to 26. So one of the questions I had is the new meter reader, is that part of the increase in A and G? But maybe you could just kind of go through those.
So I'll provide a little bit of highlight. Maybe if you want additional details, Mike may be able to give you more details, but this is in line with how the budget is formatted. Power expenses are associated with providing power to the pumps, the grinder pumps, and the tanks on the systems. Distribution expenses are tied to labor. Not a lot of cost included in that category, as well as maintenance, just simply salaries and maintenance of the plant itself. We have customer costs related to customer records and collections. Really, that's the main cost, around $11,000 or so per year, depending on the year. And then lastly, we have administrative and general expenses. This is kind of the overhead costs that all utilities include, general costs, the sewer's share of those expenditures. So that's
So I think
makes
that's
sense.
yeah, that we kind of had a little taste for that category when we were talking about the opt-out meter folks. The idea that you've got all these other categories of costs for the utility, including us, and this is these roughly 400 customers paying their share of all those other costs. I don't know if Mike or anybody else wants to add anything, but that's helpful.
That's correct. Administrator General is just those type of costs that you mentioned, similar to the item that discussed during our opt-out meter meeting a couple of months ago. And it is, joint costs, so everybody should be paying proportionally uh, to those joint overhead costs.
So, this is Commissioner Tupper, one more along this same line then with the new meter reader. So I know I'm going to get asked, are we going to do AMI for water? Is that something that's in our future? I mean, do we need a meter reader? Are we going to go to automatic reading? Can we go to automatic reading? I think that's a question we should probably ask right now.
Well, maybe Jose would be more qualified to answer, but we have a form of AMR on our water system, and we have plans to integrate into our existing AMI system. Would you say?
So a timeline on that to determine we're talking about a 5-year plan, it sounds like. Is this something that has been figured into this equation for how that would impact rates moving forward and capital improvement? I mean, we knew it cost us $5 million to do 20,000 meters. We're talking about a couple hundred meters maybe. So I'm sure it'd be a lot less, but are we figuring in AMI into this equation?
So just want to note, this is a sewer utility. I don't believe there's any
Oh,
allocation
you're
for
right.
the
That would be
meter
water.
reader.
You'd
Yeah,
be water. Sorry, I got ahead of the game. The meter reader threw me off.
yeah. Sorry about that.
But Joe, you said that you are thinking about, so we have like roughly 4,000 water customers. You are looking at sometime in the future going to a meter like AMI for water.
Yes.
Okay, so it'd be more of an automatic read and less of the guys going out and the meter people going out and driving around and collecting the data via radio, which they currently do.
We don't, as I understand it, we do not have one program to make that conversion. We're incremental. Existing meter units are failing. We're replacing them with current technology, which is more compatible with our existing AMI. So it's an incremental, as basically an asset management program as opposed to a full-on capital program to make the conversion.
Okay, so replacing things with modern technology when they wear out, basically when they quit working.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if that answered your question, Dan, but that was a good question.
Now we're kind of intermingling water a little bit with the wastewater, and that's what got me off the track was the meter reading.
So in general, we are forecasting about $480,000 to $670,000 of annual operating and maintenance related expenses for this utility. On the capital front, we have identified about $280,000 of projects. These are general reinvestment to the system, which includes the actual projects themselves and capitalized labor associated with those projects, averaging about $40,000 per year, plus inflation going up on an annual basis. So it's about $40,000 in today's dollars that's anticipated. Now, one item to note is that the plan that we're presenting for your consideration today will assume some form of borrowing in the future. It is a little bit further out in 29. Realistically, nobody will borrow $70,000 from an outside source. So this would be either rolled into the bonding process of the water utility or borrowed from an interfund loan through either an interfund loan from water or electric or something, a combination. So because we have time, we will definitely want to monitor that. But right now we are forecasting some form of borrowing, and $70,000 for the sewer utility is a lot of money as well. So what does that mean? Putting all the elements together, it gets us to the revenue requirements, where the bars here represent expenses made up of cash operating expenses in the blue, the debt service, which is going away, and we are using those reserves for LED reserves to pay off that debt service in that orange in 2025, and then net capital requirements in that yellow. You'll notice that the black line representing total revenues, operating revenues, kind of goes down. Again, that's because of that LED reserve revenue going away, and then it's staying flat after that since there's no growth projected. Right away, visually, we notice that our rates are not sufficient to cover our operating expenditures from year one. And as our costs go up and expand over time, as they're growing with inflation, we're not able to keep up. Looking at reserves, because this utility has been subsidized over time, there's no, we're starting out with no reserves. We're not able to accrue anything. And if we don't do anything with our rates, we either won't be able to do any of the projects and work, or we'll have to be subsidized by the water division again, moving into the future. So right now, doing nothing results in a bigger and bigger deficiency.
And I just did a total back of the napkin
Uh-huh.
based on what you just provided us. And it's another way of truthing what you're telling us. But you had a revenue requirement of on average 650,000. It's going up, but I just picked 650,000 and divided that by 400 customers times 12 monthly payments. So that's 4,800 monthly payments, and that comes out to about 135 bucks a month.
Hmm.
So it's roughly in line with where you're telling us the rates need to go. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. We'll see that number and actually on the next slide as well. So that's a great
mhm.
that's a great check as well. So we did prepare two scenarios from considerations. Again, this is just two scenarios. There could be infinite amount of options. This is just to start our discussion. So the first option we wanted to present to you is self-sufficiency year one. So 26 comes along, we're setting rates. We make the sewer system self-supporting itself, including minimum fund balance targets in 2026. Now, this has an impact on the water utility. So if you select S1 here, it'll impact which scenario you select on the water. If you select S2, which looks at a little bit more of a gradual phase in of self-sufficiency, that'll also have a result on the water utility. So S2 looks at phasing in the self-sufficiency target. This one looks at a 3-year phase in for operating costs. So under this strategy, the water utility will have to continue to subsidize the sewer utility from operations and capital perspective for 3 more years, gradually decreasing the subsidy, and then another period of time for them to be to meet their financial policy targets. So as we saw a couple of slides ago, each utility has to have a certain amount of cash on hand available. We're taking our time to get to that point. So we're getting to operational sufficiency in 3 years, and then taking a bit longer to get to the cash reserve sufficiency into 2036. So it's a double phase in, two-prong phase in type of an approach. And as we talked about in the beginning, the big assumption here from what we're showing you, and this could be again addressed as a follow-up item, is that we are assuming that the rates will be consolidated into one system charge. If that's not what you're looking for, we can definitely bring something back at a different meeting for your additional consideration. So what does that mean? Looking at this slide, we wanted to provide you with the scenario summary side by side. The first pair of tables at the top summarize scenario one, and the second pair below summarize scenario two. Looking at the combination of tables, the first of the pair shows you the annual percentage increase that would be necessary to meet our obligations. It shows you the subsidy that is required from the water utility. You'll notice all scenarios will show a 25 subsidy just because we're just out of time to do anything in 2025. And then this shows you the amount of debt that we're forecasting the need. That's that $70,000 in 2029 that may change as we get closer to the time horizon. The second table shows you the current rates in place by system, as well as the consolidated rate for one system starting in 2026, and then the increases applied across the board. So as Commissioner Randall mentioned, you did the analysis, that's right around that $131 if you were to do the adjustment all in one step. Scenario two takes a little bit of a gradual approach, taking 3 years to get there. So again, with compounding considered, we're looking at increasing the rates about to $85, which is not a big jump for the standard rate. The Cala rate would go up to the same $85, and the Beckett rate would be same $85, and then gradually they will catch up. By the 2030 time period, you'll notice the results are almost the same. So it's just how quickly do we get there? Now, there are benefits of going there faster from a financial perspective, meaning that you'll accrue more cash, which will allow you to meet reserves, and then you'll earn interest on that cash. But it comes with a higher front end adjustment to everybody else. So there's pros and cons to each scenario. Now, I can show you a quick comparison of neighboring utilities in the next slide, or we can pause here and have a discussion here before moving on. Please let me know what you prefer.
Questions on this slide,
Okay.
if we have any. Do we have any, commissioners?
Well, that's going to be if we try to jump to self-sufficiency in a year, that's a mighty steep increase. Particularly Calipoint, which is $90 increase.
Yeah,
We're going to have, if we try to do it in 1 year, we're going to hear from customers who are not very happy about that significant an increase in that short a period of time.
I agree, and it's interesting too, and I kind of see the logic of going to a postage stamp rate for the systems. I mean, you were able to pull together a cost of service for each one separately. Over time, that would get more complicated, I'm presuming, because it's like literally you're having to keep track of people's time on the different systems. You're having to keep track of capital expenses on the different systems. We would be creating kind of this forever obligation that I think would be difficult to administer. And then to Ken, your point, call a point under that separate accounting method. They had the cheapest system. You know, so you're not only catching everybody up the fastest and they're taking the biggest hit, they had the cheapest system under the old way of doing it. So I think I would be, for those reasons, in favor of easing it in. And I know Dan doesn't like the subsidization, and I don't either. And I guess Beckett Point could always go to finding a contractor or somebody else to manage their system if they don't want us to do it. But my city, I don't have my most recent city water utility bill, but it was upwards of $200. So these things aren't cheap, but I would probably favor the phase in, since we're doing two things at once. We're making everybody postage stamp, which is making it the most expensive for Call Point. So
Well,
I'll stop there.
no matter what we do, everybody's going to be unhappy. I think that's a foregone conclusion.
I agree.
What those dollar amounts come out to will matter, though, at some point. I am not in favor of the postage stamp at this point until we get more information. I think the people that are getting certain services and have certain capital improvement issues, this is something we're going to face with new systems wanting to come in, right? Are we going to postage stamp new people coming in as well, other systems that are failing? They're going to have to true up their systems. I think this is a case where, and it's on us to a certain extent, we need to true up these systems here fairly aggressively. We should have done it 3 years ago and we chose to punt. Now here we are again. There's always going to be some issue, whether it's COVID or high interest rates or whatever it is. There's always going to be something. So there's going to be pain here. I'm not in favor of the one system charge at this point. Beyond that, how we go about phasing this in, I do think we need to front load it in some aspect, maybe not, completely. I don't think anyone here wants to do the one shot upfront thing, but I do think we should front load it rather than tail it in. So I would kind of flip that a little bit, say maybe we need to tweak those numbers a little more and go to 100 and then down to 90 and down to 80. It's rough math. I'm not doing exact numbers, but I think maybe something more like that might be a better option.
I'm going to ask Sergey and Joe and Mike, you went to the postage stamp kind of recommendation here. Could you talk a little bit about why you proposed that, and what do you see the future of us keeping separate categories? What would that look like, and how difficult would that be, or is it doable to keep the three systems accounted for separately?
I mean, it's because they're all customers getting the same service. We do provide the same service to each one of them. Yes, they are set up a little bit different. That's why we went with the postage stamp, because they all are. We provide the same amount of service to each to each system. They are set up a little bit different. We do separate them out. It comes hard because we don't separate out every cost. So we have to, Sergey, and when him and Paul are working on the rates and stuff, they do have to do some calculations to figure out how to allocate shared costs to each utility, to each system. So by doing that, by having a postage stamp, it allows that allocation doesn't have to be figured because you have to base it on something. What you base it on. So, I mean, yes, it can be done either way. It's just how detailed do we want to get into all the accounting and everything for it when we provide the same amount of service, the same level of service to each system.
So what I heard you say, Mike, was that some costs you are able to track by the different septic system classes as we've broken them out there, but a lot of other costs you couldn't. So you had to assign some values, basically assume, okay, we've got the sewer cost. We can't say which one it goes with, and you have to make some assumptions and come up with a number.
Correct.
Okay.
I would just note a couple of the things. There's some economies of scale when we have the staffing that we have spread over a number of systems. So each of these systems essentially benefits from an economy of scale perspective. Now, I believe Collow Point and Beckett could consider a different operator than us, but that's.
I think Collow, we own the system though, don't we? I thought we bought it from the developer. I thought we bought the water and sewer system from the developer.
You've got better history than I, Jeff. That's correct.
Ken, you were here, is that what you recall?
I honestly don't recall
Okay.
who owns the Hollow Point system.
Jose's agreeing with you, Jeff, and he's got a lot more runway.
Yeah, I remember. I think, Ken, that might have actually happened before you were on the board. I think there was that.
Sorry for the distraction. Let's just say Beckett get a different operator, but they would have to deal with the same economy of scale issue. And then the other thing I would just add is with respect to Commissioner Tupper's comment, the fundamental question here is who's representing water customers and how much do we lean on water customers? So granted, it is a significant step change to solve this problem in 1 year, but it's essentially asking water customers to continue subsidizing over a longer period of time. It's a challenging question for commissioners. It's one or the other. Somebody's paying, you either have a non-beneficiary paying or you have the beneficiary paying.
So it sounds like a phase-in approach from that perspective. I guess it's a two-part question. First part upfront or phased in, and it seems there's consensus around the phase-in.
Well, I'm not sure if there was. I mean, Dan
Okay.
Dan was urging us to keep them separate, and Ken and I were in support of the phase in. I thought Dan was maybe Dan, what's your position now based on that additional info?
I still am at a point where I think, again, Beckett is kind of the exception. They've gotten a pass for the last year, and they don't take the same service that the other systems take. So I don't know if I'm assuming that's a fair statement. Yeah.
And let me apologize. The first question is ignoring the system-specific rates. So the actual rates charged to the customers. Is the preference to make the sewer utility as a whole self-sufficient right away in year one, or take time to get there without considering the type of charge? Is the first question.
Right.
I'm okay with the phase in, but like I said, I would like to see us flip the script, and my numbers were all off. It'd be like we'll say a $30 increase the first year, a $20 increase the second year over that, and then a $10 increase that would put us in roughly the same final number of 150, right? We're looking at $50 or $60 worth of increase over that 4-year period.
So Commissioner Tupper, could we state it maybe a little bit differently?
Sure. Go ahead.
There's 30% per year in the phase in. So could you choose some different percentages that you'd be comfortable with, like a 50%, 25%, or something like that?
Yeah. Again, I'm not familiar with the numbers enough to say what those percentages should be, but I think we should kind of go that route with it. I don't know what that percentage would be. Maybe it is 50, 30, 20. I don't know. But I prefer front loading it is the term I'll use with whatever we're doing to get a little bit more of that reserve up front, because it's going to be painful regardless over the course of 3 years, and especially if we borrow money up front to do some of the capital, that may change the dynamic of what we want these rates to look like as well. So again, there's a whole lot of moving parts here. But I would rather we try and recover a little more cost up front to build the reserve or take care of some of the imminent capital improvement that has to be done. Because I don't know what our schedule is for getting a bond or a loan or anything like that, even if they are in favorable conditions.
So I would be comfortable with a 40, 30, and 30, and then just cost of living, as it were, for the next couple of years.
Sergey, does that make
So that-
sense? Or
So
Joe?
then 40%, and a 30%, or 40, 30, 30
40, 30, 30.
Yes.
And,
instead of 30, 30, 30. So a little bit higher front end. And then instead of 4.5, closer to 3 or 3.5.
Yeah.
Because we have to take into account water is still going to be subsidized and during that period.
Mm-hmm.
So
But it's going to decline.
yeah, but those wastewater customers are also paying higher water rates to subsidize themselves. So
would you be on board with Ken's alternative?
anything is better than what I was looking at. So if everyone's in agreement with that, that's where we want to go. I'll make the same statement I did 3 years ago. As we just keep kicking the can down the road, things are going to keep getting worse, not better. I hate to say it in those terms because this is real people, real money, and real problems. But we have to. This has to pay for itself.
President Randall, how do you feel about it?
I'm fine with that, and I think when we get to the point where we're adopting a resolution and we're sending out notices, I think we need to do a better job of providing these folks that like $48 at Collar Point, $65 at Beckett Point. That's quite low compared to what other people are paying on systems, and we need including Port Townsend, and we need to provide, and whatever the tri-area sewer rate is, I assume we're going to have that rate too. So I think we need to do some education, and it's when you look at, oh wow, it's going from 48 to 84, it's it's $40. That's I can't even get dinner for $40 anymore. So yeah, I'm fine with that percentage breakdown.
So the next slide will give you some comps. Sergey, was that good enough feedback on the?
Yeah, so that helps us hone in on the overall need, but I just want to also confirm, I think there was a little bit of a discussion where some commissioners were comfortable with one system and some commissioners wanted still a cost-based. So just to confirm, next time we meet, you want to see the new overall 40, 30, 30, and then you want to see both what it would be at cost versus a system postage stamp. So you want to see both of those. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yeah, I would prefer to see something like that.
Okay, so two alternatives for the actual rates themselves. So the first question is overall sewer utility needs. We got everybody's on board. The second question of how we collect it, that's still being discussed, and that's what we'll bring back as a follow-up item.
Yeah, and then let's go look at the comp slide to reflect President Randall's comments as well.
Okay, so in this slide, we wanted to provide you a comparison. These are the similar utilities we brought back last time. Some of them will not be in the area, and the reason for that is because we were trying to be as comparable as possible to the same type of sewer systems, because you don't have treatment plants like majority of the sewer utilities that do. So these are the systems that we were able to identify that had similar type of septic systems or similar type of sewer service provided to them. We can also add different comparables if you like, but right now, depending on the system, your Cala Point rate's the lowest. The Beckett Point at the PAWS 22 rates is also on the low end, and your standard rate somewhere in the middle, a little bit to the right of the middle. scenario two, because we weren't sure which option we want to go to, we wanted to kind of show you what that would take you in 2026. We'll still keep you at the same point for everybody. While we know that a lot of these utilities are also going through rate updates and rate studies and will be adjusting rates. As a reminder, Clallam PD had similar system-specific, area-specific charges. I believe they converted their specific rates to a one system rate. Again, not apples and apples. This is everybody's different. Everybody's system is slightly different. Everybody's policies are different. But just to give you some background and context as well.
So, Sergey, were you saying that when you were looking at these systems, you were looking for comparables that were the same type, so septic systems, and you were looking for roughly the same size too? So roughly around 400 or not like 10,000?
As best as we could.
Okay.
None of them should be large, I don't
Okay.
believe. But I don't remember if they're probably not all the same size. It's very
Sure.
challenging to find
Understood.
them to be the same. Yeah.
And then Clallam PUD, I wasn't aware that they managed community septic systems. Do you know anything about theirs?
I would have to look up a little bit more background on theirs.
Okay. And then Holmes Harbor, that's a name I'm not familiar with. Where's that?
Would be.
Would
Would
on
be. Oh, okay, cool. All right. Those are my questions.
President Randall, you made a comment about the tri-area sewer. I just wanted to clarify that my understanding is that this commission does not have rate over that.
Right.
It's simply an operator at cost for the county.
Right. And it's a different type of system, so it's probably not appropriate to list it as a comparable.
Precisely. That's why Sergey did not include those types of
Yeah,
systems.
I think that's fine. But when we get to doing this, I think we should put together some educational information for folks and explaining these are like systems, not large, similar size or at least in proportion to our size comparable. Because Dan's right. People will not be happy, but we do have to balance the books.
Okay, we're a full hour in and we haven't touched water yet.
I can speed it up if you like.
Well, the water side looks like it's better news, so hopefully it'll go faster.
Okay. All right, so we'll dive right into the water utility. So just a refresher, we are using data, billing data to forecast our revenues and assuming a 0.5% growth rate. There are non-rate revenues for this utility. They're not significant, but there are some sources related to miscellaneous services, rents for property, LED reserves, again, upfront to help us with some of the debt repayment, miscellaneous non-operating income, as well as interest income. But as you can see visually, majority of our revenues are still coming from rates. Just like in the sewer discussion, we are not including taxes or timber revenue for this utility for forecasting purposes. Overall, we're forecasting about 4.8 million with some of the LED reserves being used for debt service, decreasing to about 4.5 once that debt service and the reserves have been used up. On the expenses, again, forecasting our 25 actuals and 26 budget, including the water meter reader position. So as we talked about in the prior utility, we are including that position here and escalating with various inflation factors, averaging at about 3.5% per year. We're forecasting our operating costs around $2.5 million to $3.3 million per year, with a similar breakdown like we did for sewer, where we have distribution, power related costs, customer service related costs, and administrative and general related costs making up our forecast. So similar trends as on the sewer utilities and similar type of expenses. Here we have a little bit more detail for our Oh, go ahead.
Before we get off expenses, again, this is a little bit off topic, but it's not off topic, and that is Peterson Lake a water asset? I think that's
Yes, it is.
So Peterson Lake is a water asset, and we're going to be paying that off in the loan on that in 2026. So that is an expense that we will no longer be paying every month. I don't know, $14,000, $15,000. Have we looked at that money as part of water revenue and water expense that's going to be freed up in the budget? Are we?
Yeah,
how are we accounting for the Peterson Lake debt that will be paid off, and then now there at some point during the year there will no longer be that expense?
So looking at O&M expenses, you're only looking at interest, which is a very small portion of that because it was a loan. It was a liability on the balance sheet. It was not included in the O&M expenses. It's only the interest portion of it. So yes, that was as part of that, just like the other ones, we reduced it as we went out.
Okay, I just want us to keep in mind that is something that's going into the water, and there's no rates being gained from that. So, but we are going to have, things that we have to do at that place that will come out of the water budget, correct?
Yes.
So I just want to put it on everybody's radar that that's something we should not be forgetting about or overlooking as we look at water rates and who's paying for what. That's a water asset, or all the water customers going to pay for whatever it takes on the Peterson Lake side of the ledger. That's not really a Sergey issue. That's going to be our issue, but something he should be aware of and we should be talking.
Okay,
Sorry, Sergey.
No worries. We'll follow up after the meeting as well to double check. All right. Now, in terms of the capital side, here we have a little bit more detail for you regarding the plan. Our overall plan over the next 6 years, including the 25 current year, is anticipated at about $21 million with some rounding there, 20.8 million with inflation to the year of construction. You can see the breakdown of projects by area. Our funding for these is being performed and forecasted to be done through reserves, cash, a combination of loans, as we talked about in the general assumptions, connection charges and contributions, but loans do make up a substantial portion of the financing. The low interest loan in 26 of 4 million and anticipated revenue bonds in 27 and 29 to help us pay for some of those larger projects that will help pay for a big portion of the capital investments. Putting everything together again brings us to the revenue requirement. Here you can see visually the bars represent expenses made up of cash operating expenses in the blue, the debt service in the orange, a small sliver, the subsidy to sewer, because again, anything we account for here on the sewer side has to appear here, and the longer the subsidy occurs, the longer we have to forecast it out. So the scenario, it becomes smaller and smaller, so it might not be visible in the outer years, but we'll have to tweak it based on the scenario that we project here as well. And then we have net capital net of connection charges here as well. You'll see that we are able to fund our operations and our debt service pretty well with our rates at current levels. And we actually have some capacity for rate funded capital based on our prior rate study action, but we do have some larger capital investment needs. And on average, where our rates are not sufficient to cover the capital obligations without financing and associated debt service. So here, if we don't do anything, if we don't borrow, we have a little bit of reserves forecasted at the end of 25. And if we don't do anything, we're just going to continue to decrease our balances and basically won't be able to do the plan. So staying consistent with the sewer scenarios, and again, this will change based on the requested scenario that we talked about on sewer. Scenario 1 is just self-sufficiency for the sewer fund by 26, so a little bit less use of subsidies from the water utility, and scenario 2 is a gradual phase in, relying on the water utility a little bit more. Here, any kind of rate action we propose will be applied across the board or proportionally to fixed and variable charges for all rates on all customer classes. So what does that mean? For scenario 1, if we do a higher front-end increase for the sewer utility, we're able to keep the increases closer to 4.25% for the water system with inflationary 3% in the back end. We are anticipating bonding and low interest loans in the next 4 or 5 years. And that would increase our rates around $3 to $2 per month for a typical customer using 4,200 gallons per month. Scenario 2, which would gradually phase in the customers over time, would look at a 5% increase for water, followed by 3%. Similar amount of a debt borrowed. Increases would be a little higher, up to $3.50 by the third year, and then down to $2. The new scenario that was discussed will be somewhere in the middle, probably closer to the 5%, but under 5% potentially, just going off the top of my head here.
That's such a small difference. I mean, it's like $1 difference a month. It just seems like why would we bother phasing it in?
Right, because of magnitude of scale, it might not be as huge of an impact for water for the differences, but sewer, it makes such a large difference for those customers. So it's again,
Hmm.
because there's only 400 customers versus thousands, makes a big difference here.
Well,
All right.
again, I think the key to front loading it to build the reserve
So,
because we have a lot
and
of aging infrastructure.
and I get it too. You're saying this is tied to the other decision we make. So I can't I can't make one decision here and another decision there. Whatever decision there we make there is reflected here.
Yeah,
Okay, got it. So you'll update
exactly.
these with the different percentages we gave you.
Exactly. We'll
Okay,
consolidate it into the new scenario, and that'll be reduced a little bit to account for that sewer scenario.
got it. Thank you.
Okay. So here we just wanted to show you the rates. There are a little bit more rates because there's more classes of service by area as well. We have residential, CalaPoint. They have specific type of rate structures in the fixed charge and the commercial rate that varies by meter size. Uh, Again, all we're doing is we're showing you scenario two, the 5%, and we'll change that to align with the new scenario that we're going to bring back. And we're just simply applying the 5% proportionally to all charges, everybody. So it's pretty straightforward. Everybody gets the same percentage impact. Similarly, we have the same rates. We have the residential and the CalPoint rates. In the past, they were different. Now, just to show you, they're the same. We have transitioned them to the same type charge as well as the commercial side. Everybody has the same volumetric rate, and these will be adjusted by the new proposed scenario as well.
Well, to me, this is pretty good news because it's just showing that we took on the biggest pain back in 2021 or whenever we
Mhm.
did that rate increase, and now it's a much more gradual. So this kind of gets back to Dan's point of the pain we're going to have to get through with the initial adjustments to sewer. Once we're through it, we should get back to gradual, very gradual increases.
Right. Okay. And similarly, we brought back the comparison here because our systems, the water system is a little bit more in line with neighboring utilities. These are more in line with the PDs, trying to target similar sized or neighboring type of utilities. Here we are in the lower end. The proposed rate will keep us in the same position. And again, this is apples and oranges because others are going through the same studies. Others will have adjustments while we're showing you rates today and a proposed rate as well. So others will be moving up most likely as well. And you are in the lower end of the comparison, and you'll stay at that lower end of this comparison as well.
Well, I think again, it kind of shows where we weren't aggressive enough before. Our base rate is lower than everybody, right? I think that's what we're looking at with the increases that are coming. It's going to probably have to happen in the base rate.
Yeah, and we would combine the capital surcharge, but even with the capital surcharge, which is a fixed charge, um, it's either in line or a little lower than other utilities. All right, so that's really the end of the presentation here. The big discussion points that we needed were around sewer. So we did receive direction from you. Just to summarize, we will bring back a new scenario that is a slightly adjusted phase-in with 40, 30, 30 percentages and inflation thereafter. And then in addition to that, we'll show you again system-wide one system charge as well as the updated system-specific rates for your consideration. So that'll be the sewer. And that'll translate to the water utility, which will have a slightly modified, but pretty close to the scenario two that we saw there as well. And that kind of gives us direction rate design to give you both options to consider. And the water utility, I just wanted to confirm everybody's okay with across the board for now.
When you say across the board, meaning
Raising the basic charges equally by 5% as the volume charges, or do the commissioners want to see something different?
I'm sorry, I got lost on that. What slide was that
Sure.
again?
So here, when I was showing the basic charges, they're going up by 5%. That means the volume charges are also going up by 5%. Alternatively, you could increase these by 10 and only increase these by whatever less than 5% average.
No, I think I'm fine with that. Again, we're down to where the amounts are, where we're starting is reasonably low, and the percentage is reasonably low. To me, I think that's fine.
Okay. So I think that gives us direction that we're looking for. Joe, Mike, is there anything else that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah. So President Randall asked a question. Will helpfully directed me to the Clallam PUD website to answer Jeff's question about wastewater rates in our neighbor. And it's interesting that they apparently faced a very similar situation on wastewater rates. So they own 4 public wastewater systems serving 85 connections. And prior to 2024, they had varying charges. And since the 2019 rate study, they have unified their costs to a common rate schedule effective March 1st, 2025. So again, they faced similar decisions, came to a conclusion aligned with Sergey's recommendation of charging the same rate across their multiple systems. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. And so, Sergey, your presentation is done.
That's it.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioners, did you have any more questions at this point or discussion?
I have a little bit. I don't know, not necessarily maybe for Sergey at this point. It might be more for ourselves, and that is, whether we're going to do a bond or whether we're going to do some loans. I mean, I think that's still something we kind of need to figure out on the capital side, is where we're going to go for money, and because the state revolving fund, which is a source for water and stuff, is not going to be there, or in a way that we'll be able to get anything sizable out of it. And interest rates, I would hope, are going to keep coming down. So maybe loans over bonds. Has anybody got any information about what we want to do and whether we want to go with loans or bonds if we're going to borrow debt or take on debt?
So what was the source of loan that would be at, what was it, 0.86%?
That's our loan from Public Works, I think.
Is that correct? Is that a Public Works loan?
Yeah, that is a public works loan for the for the Coil water system.
Which we already secured, but I wouldn't count on any of that moving forward with the state budget the way it is.
I mean, I guess the question I had, did we have big expected capital funds that we were needing to borrow for? I saw the one number of 70,000, which is pretty small. Was there a big number with water that we were looking at in the future?
Well, I know we were doing tanks, right? Weren't we getting some money to do a study on getting some tanks or improved water tanks? I mean, I know we got some projects coming, right?
So we're anticipating approximately $12 million of bonds.
Okay, that's a big number.
That's why I'm asking. We kind of need to get all this stuff kind of figured out up front to make assumptions and figure out rates. If we're going to have debt coverage that we have to make, that has to be baked into the rates.
So Sergey, what was the assumption you're using then? If you're looking at $12 million over some time frame, what was the assumption on where that money would come from?
So for now, to be conservative, would be the bond market.
Okay.
In reality, so anything more favorable that you may accrue, and that's why it's still a couple years out. So
Right.
we're being conservative and assuming probably the most expensive funding source, and hopefully the availability of low interest loans will become greater as it has been in the past, but it has been shrinking more recent times.
Okay.
So
And what was the interest rate you were looking at those?
4.5%.
4.5%, and that was built into your model.
That was.
Okay, so we've seen it. Okay. I wanted to see if, I don't know if there's any public on the line, if anybody had any questions or comments. Mike or whoever's monitoring things, do we have any general public who might want to ask a question or make a comment?
I am not seeing any right now.
And there's nobody in the room?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Commissioners, any further discussion? I think we've given you the direction you need. Are we all satisfied at this point, Dan and Ken? I can't see
More
Dan.
or less, yes.
I can't
Yeah,
see you. Okay.
A lot of moving parts still.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the presentation, Sergey. Nice to see you again. I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
And we have completed our agenda. It's 5:24, and this meeting is adjourned. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Sergey.
Night all.